Yoga Connection with Zorananda is a deep dive into the world of yoga, exploring the rich history of tradition, methodology, and practices both ancient and modern. Follow along as yoga is explored through solo episodes to guest interviews to understand its vast reach around the world. Hello and welcome to the Yoga Connection. My name is Zorananda, and today is part 2 of the Hatha Yoga episode in our yoga series, where we are examining all the different types of yogas, and today focusing in on the Hatha Yoga practice itself. And I'm going to be pulling my information from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, which is what I consider the Bible of Hatha Yoga, at least in our modern age. And it's just such a great resource for the entirety of the practice. You know, it's over 600 pages, and it details everything you need to know in all aspects of the practice. And so today we're going to look at what Hatha Yoga is defined as in terms of its parts in its practice. And so let's get right into it. So at the back of the book, there's a kind of glossary of terms. And when you get to Hatha Yoga, the definition of it is, quote, the science of yoga which purifies the whole physical body by means of shatkarma, asana, pranayama, mudra, bandha, concentration, or dharana as a prelude to Raja Yoga and Samadhi. So we're going to look at all those elements: shatkarma, asana, pranayama, mudra, bandha, concentration, and go one by one and look at what the practice entails considering those aspects. So we're going to go in order that it spoke of and start with the shatkarmas. Shatkarma just means the 6 actions. So shat or sat just means 6. Karma means action. So put it together, sat karmas just means the 6 actions. And in this case, they are the actions of purification. So it's what you're doing to clean the body out. And this is a quite literal thing. And for the most part, a lot of it involves salt water. So it's using a high concentration of salt water to literally clear out the body, and more particularly the sinuses, because the sinuses can collect a lot of stuff. It can collect a lot of mucus, it can collect a lot of dust, just a lot of particulates. And so salt water is used quite a bit in these cleansings. So like the word entails, there are 6 techniques, or there are 6 actions, which are Dauti, Basti, Neti, Tratika, Nauli, and Kapalabhati. And so in Dauti, you have Antar Dauti, which is internal cleansing, Danta Dauti, which is cleaning of the teeth, and Hrid Dauti, which is cardiac. And so there's different techniques or actions even in those ones. And I've sent a link in the description of the book itself in PDF. So if you do want to follow along, I'm on page 191 where it shows a chart. And from that point onwards, it will describe and show through pictures like what the techniques are. And so in the Dautis, let's pick one of them here. So this is one that I practiced really only once in my teacher training. It's one of the hardest ones. But you know what? Let's start with an easier one. The only thing that I don't really like about this book is they don't really put things in order of like magnitude. So of like the easiest to the most difficult. They kind of just slap it all together. Um, which kind of makes sense because they're going a little bit in order of this chart. But it would be nice to see it like, okay, out of all of the techniques, like here's the easier ones to do, and then this is how it progresses. But I think the most notable of the Satkarmas is Neti. And so Jal Neti is the one that I think is the most like commercial. It's the most accepted, you know. I'm sure you've heard of like a neti pot where it's just like this little pot that you can put salt water in, and then you use it to clear out your sinuses. So the pot has a little spout that you actually just press up to your nostril, and there's a way in tilting your head in a particular way so that the water can actually run up the nostril that the spout is attached to, and then it can come out the other nostril. And the way that you have to tilt your body and tilt your head to make sure that the water runs smoothly. And out of all the ones that are mentioned in the book, this is the most accessible. This is one that you can do regularly and you won't have a problem with like the time it takes or really how difficult it is. It's fairly straightforward, right? But as you go on, the techniques get a little bit more invasive. They get a little bit more intense. There's another one here called Sutra Neti, where you literally run a kind of like thin rope up your nostril into the back of your throat and out your mouth. And that one is fairly intense. The kind of cloth that's used, the rope that's used, one part of it is covered in wax, and then the other part of it is just the cloth. And so the reasoning for this is that you need something sturdy enough to come up your sinus and through your mouth. And so then the kind of like softer fabric part can run through your sinus and collect and clear out. And the trick with Sutra Neti is we think that our sinus goes up our nostril, but it's actually not. It runs laterally into our face. And so you have to know that when you're sticking this through your nostril, that you're not trying to bring it up and like up your nose and towards your forehead, that the sinus cavity is actually, like I said, it's running laterally. And so you have to actually like kind of bring it up your nose and then angle it in so that it can come through your sinus to the back of your mouth and then out your mouth. And so this one is like fairly invasive. If you have a problem with like things going up your nose, or even when you're trying to get the end of it out, you actually have to stick your fingers into the back of your throat to grab it and then pull it through. And it's a bit rough, so it's actually recommended to cover it in either coconut oil or ghee. I mean, out of the two, coconut oil is going to be the least pungent, right? Because ghee has a taste to it, has a smell to it. So the thing that you'll realize getting into these practices is that you have to eliminate shame of your body. If you think your mucus and your sinus and the back of your throat is like gross and there's the gag reflex, then as you go through this, you'll see that eliminating shame or eliminating being grossed out or being picky is a must. You have to get rid of all that stuff. You have to be okay with what is in the body and what the body is made out of and what is happening in these processes, because you'll start to discover what you've been holding on in your body without knowing it. And these cleansing techniques really show you what the body is made of, and especially the kind of toxins that it holds on to. And so as like a progressive in things getting more and more gross, Jal Neti, the neti pot, is the like cleanest out of them. You know, you're just running salt water through your nostrils. I mean, when you look down, like I do it over my bathtub so that I just have a lot of space to then like run the water through and then clear out my nostrils just by breathing. And there's even a protocol for that too, that you want to make sure that you're tilting your head side to side and breathing out through both nostrils so that you can clearly get all of the remaining kind of water out of your nose. You don't want to use a tissue or something and then blow your nose like you got boogers. You actually want to keep both nostrils open and turn side to side. And that's why it's good to be in your bathroom and do it in the bathtub, because then you can just kind of rinse everything off. But, you know, if you have somewhat of a stuffed up nose, doing this will just really clear things out. And you'll see, like, when you look down at the tub, that there's just like, you know, snot everywhere. But the point of this isn't to get too gross, but I just want to emphasize the importance of getting used to what is in your body and getting over the weird hang-ups on the sounds your body makes, the mucus that it produces, the like toxins that we hold on to, or whatever particulates, just debris inside of our body, and what it means to clear these things out, from our sinuses to our lungs to our stomach. That this whole part of the Sat Karmas is to clean out your body to the best of your abilities, and it covers everything, and it can really actually just scrub you clean from head to toe, regardless of how gross it is, right? So the one that I was going to get into that is the most difficult is the Vajradauti. So this is where, and this is actually kind of wild. Again, this is one that I did once in my teacher training, and it is literally eating a 22-foot long piece of cloth. And so the cloth itself is only maybe about 3 inches wide, and it's thin. But there's a lot of it. So in our training, we were given 11 feet, but typically it's 22 feet. And the goal here is to pass the two sphincters in your throat and at your stomach. So basically at the base of your throat, you have this sphincter that opens and closes, and it does so in the case there's food coming in, right? So as soon as there's a particular amount of weight that presses down on it, it opens, because it's basically being signaled that there's food or water coming through. And then you have another one right at the entrance of your stomach. And so that's just to make sure that things are passing at a particular rate, and so that you're not just like filling your stomach, you know, unabated. So these two are really tricky to control. And you have a gag reflex that basically is going to prevent anything foreign or anything non-food related from coming in, or coming in too quickly, or too big of an object. You know, like your body is really intelligent in making sure that what's coming into it is the proper thing that's coming into it. So you have to trick your body. So imagine you have this you have this cloth. It's like 3 inches wide, and you basically have it in salt water again. You want to use salt water because you want to use something that isn't going to turn to urine right away, that the body is going to hold on to. And it has like kind of like antiseptic qualities to it. The salt water is going to be antibacterial to some degree. And so the trick is you have to kind of eat the cloth, right? And you want to use salt water to like help it pass down, but it's so hard. Like I remember I got like almost all 11 feet in, and the thing is that the throat sphincter you're gonna naturally have control over, but then the stomach one you're not. So you actually have to keep swallowing and keep swallowing and keep swallowing and keep swallowing so that the rope has enough of it in your esophagus and down to the stomach that there's enough weight kind of pressing on the sphincter to the stomach that it just naturally triggers it to open. And that is the hardest part. And so the point of this is that the rope or the cloth goes down into the stomach, and you actually, it kind of like coils around in the stomach, and it acts as a way to scrub the inside of the stomach. So you start to clean what's kind of being held to the sides of the stomach. You got to think about like all the food that we eat over years and years and years. Our stomach is probably just lined and caked with all sorts of stuff. And again, I know this is gross, but the point of doing this work is getting over that. You just have to get over it. This is what is happening in the body, and you just have to normalize it, and you have to be okay with it. And you have to see the value in doing this kind of stuff to really clean out the vessel that is our body, right? So this is one that is one of the more intensive ones. It is one of the more invasive ones because obviously you're putting something into your body that you normally are not putting into your body. And so once you get all of this cloth in your body and you've gotten basically to the very end where a few inches is basically left, because you don't want to swallow the whole thing, obviously, and have this like 22-foot long cloth in your stomach. And that's when you do something like Nauli Kriya or the stomach churning, where you're moving your stomach around in different directions. You're pumping it up and down because you're basically wanting to move this cloth inside your stomach. And then you have to pull it out. So then you're pulling out with it all the stuff that was, kind of held in your stomach. And again, all of this is done on an empty stomach. So you're basically wanting to do this at a point where you fasted, and even typically done possibly before this next technique that I'll talk about that I've done. But then you pull the rope, or you pull the cloth out, and then you do a technique called Vamana Dauti. And Vamana Dauti is where you drink a bunch of salt water, you swish it around your stomach, and then you vomit it like Vamana, right? Vamana Dauti, Vamana, vomit, whatever. So again, these are just things that we feel icky about, right? So like drinking a liter of salt water, swishing it around in your stomach, and then making yourself throw up. When we think of throwing up, we think about sickness, right? That we're vomiting because we have a stomach bug, or it's very involuntary. So all this stuff is completely voluntary, and you just have to be okay with doing these things and not being grossed out by it, and seeing that there's a kind of weird how do I want to say it? It's like a new kind of power you have over yourself, that you just no longer are grossed out by these things. You're not grossed out by bodily waste or processing or mucus or anything going up your nose, anything being vomited out, that it's just no longer a perturbance in your life, which is the hardest thing, because we're all, I think, sissies when it comes to this stuff. I'm pretty sure most of you listening to this are like, oh my God, why are you talking about this stuff? But it's kind of an initiation as well. It's going to be a signifier that you're going to be able to handle what it takes to get to the next levels of your yoga practice and get to the next levels of self-discovery, right? What you're going to be discovering about your nature, because that's what a lot of this is. A lot of this is scientific, and just like in the definition says, right, the science of examining the body and what it is capable of, right? So the science of yoga, which purifies the whole physical body by means of. And so these practices of satkarmas, and viewing them as a science, is that you're discovering something about yourself. You're discovering why you have emotions around these things. And that's the one thing my teacher would talk about a lot when we're doing all these things, is he would stress, look at the emotions that come up, because it's not just physical stuff that's coming up. It's emotions around why we've held on to these things. So this last one isn't described as part of the satkarmas, but I think is an important one. It's something that I learned, and I think it's like on the scale of cleansing techniques, it's going to be the most invasive and the most intense, with the most benefits, and that's Shanka Prakshalana. And essentially that is drinking salt water to then be eliminated through your bowels. And the process is quite intense, because you're drinking about 18 liters of salt water, and all those 18 liters are running through your system. And so this is the one that's really going to clean you out. And the reason why it makes it so intense is because the length of time it takes as well. You'll get a false idea that you're done, because as your body is being cleansed and as this liquid is moving through your body, there'll be a moment about halfway through where suddenly it's all transparent and clear. But then as you keep going, suddenly there'll be another round of it looking yellow and discolored and stuff. And then there'll be the final kind of clear and transparency to the liquid. And so again, this is another part of the cleansing that is going to challenge you, not only physically of drinking that much water and passing it through your system, because there are particular physical techniques that you have to do to basically open the duodenum, so that at the end of your stomach, the next sphincter is in the duodenum, that basically allows whatever particulates to go through the digestive system, right? And so now you're having to trick the body to open up for all this salt water to pass through, so that whatever is in the intestines can be flooded out. And for the most part, because of our diet here in the West, our intestines are just full of stuff, and it can be very uncomfortable in the first stages of trying to force stuff out of our body with a huge, like basically a tidal wave of water. And I had someone in my training way back in the day that had a very difficult time, and that they basically had some kind of blockage going on and just couldn't get the water through, and needed help basically massaging their guts to basically break down whatever blockages that they've had so that the water can pass through, and eventually was able to make it. But what follows afterwards is a noticeable lightness, like a noticeable clearing out of things that you've held on to for so long. It actually, like, it gets me thinking about doing it again. But the next most difficult part is what you eat afterwards. So when you're in an ashram, like where I was doing this training and going through these techniques, is that you have the support to then deal with the aftermath of doing this. And essentially there's a very like particular food that you need to eat. And, you know, this is where my teacher would say, you know, when we're doing these cleaning techniques, you're not only cleaning the body, you're also cleaning the mind and your emotions too. So those things will come up, right? And so our meal for the next week was something called khichdi, which is basically like a very soft vegetable kind of soup stew, where it's basically made out of lentils and a broth, and so our diet for that week was this khichdi and ghee. And so the first day we're only eating a full ladle of the khichdi and a full ladle of ghee. And just imagine eating this concoction of basically baby food with all of this melted ghee. And so the ghee is to basically re-lubricate your intestines and to build back the mucus in the system, because your intestines has these mucus glands that basically allows for everything to pass smoothly without causing any damage to the intestinal walls. So you have to build back this mucus layer. And so when you eat this like kind of soupy food that has very little vegetables, it's all kind of blended together like baby food, and the ghee, eating that 3 times a day, every day for a week is intense. Luckily for me, I am a good eater. I can just basically eat anything that's in front of me, and I'll eat everything. But not a lot of people are like that. Not a lot of people can just look at the food that they're given and just have no problem eating it. I mean, that's just how I was raised all throughout my life. And so I had no problem eating any of this stuff, right? And I'm able to put myself into a state of mind where I can do it happily, and I can be like, this is so good, and I kind of fake it till I make it, until I notice that, you know, days have gone by and I'm totally fine, because, you know, over the days it goes from, you know, 1 ladle of the khichdi and 1 ladle of the ghee to then, you know, 2 ladles of the khichdi and half a ladle of ghee, and then they slowly lessen the amount of ghee, and then they start adding vegetables and stuff, and they make it more hearty. So by the end of the day, at the end of the week, you know, you're eating something that looks more like food. And then after that, they start to slowly introduce the menu back to us of like the normal foods that we'd eat in the ashram, normal meals. But I remember 2 instances in my training where there's one lady who is looking down at her plate of mush and ghee, and everyone's just there and eating, and she's just blankly staring at the kitchery, and just starts crying and crying. And, the thing that Vishnuji said to us, so as we're getting into all this, as we're doing the cleansing, he stressed to us, look, this will bring up emotional stuff. The part of the reason why we're doing this is because you need to learn about the attachments that you have to food, attachments that you have to why you eat and what you eat. And things are going to start to come up when you can't succumb to your tendencies and the habits of the foods that you eat. And so when you're forced to eat the same thing every day, where you can't eat your comfort foods, you can't eat your 3 meals a day that you want, you can't be picky, you have to eat the thing that you eat, it's going to bring things up. So in this case, with this one student, it was bringing up, all those emotions of like the things that she wasn't able to eat and the things that she had to control. And the other instance is I had this one woman sitting next to me, and my teacher said, like, when we come around to give you the food, when we come around the second time, if you hesitate, we're not going to give you the food, Like, if you're physically hungry, then you'll have no problem being like, yep, I want seconds. But if you're emotionally hungry, that's a different thing, and we'll say no to you. And so he's coming around, and he gets to the woman next to me, and he looks at her and goes, more? And she looks at him and goes, oh, well, yes, I want more. And he was like, nope, and walked right by her, and she just like, ah, and came to me, and he was like, more? And I was like, yep. And he gave me more and just smiled and walked away. And so the thing that I realized is, like, just don't hesitate, and that might sound mean. And by all means, in that week, so many people were very temperamental, and so many people had a lot of issues with what was going on. But my teacher is really good at what he does. And so he's really good at explaining, look, you're not here on vacation. You're not here with servants and people doing what you want to do. You're here to learn yoga. You're here as a student. You're here to do the work. And so this is a part of the work. So if you're going to come into an ashram for a teacher training and expect people to treat you like you're on vacation, you're going to have a rough time. And so there were quite a few people who just had a really rough time because they did think that, like, they were on vacation, they were tourists, and they were seeing all this cool stuff. But, like, you have to go in there prepared for unexpected things to happen. And that sounds almost impossible, but the way that you come prepared is that you affirm that you're there for yoga. So anytime I go to another country and I'm going there to practice yoga, I affirm right then and there, I'm here for yoga. I'm not here to be a tourist. I don't care. I don't want to go shopping. I don't want to go and see all these crazy things. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to be a yogi. And so then it makes accepting how things go a lot easier. So it's a bit of a rant and a bit of storytelling, but I'm going to continue on. So again, the sat karmas are fairly important in the yoga process, and I didn't go through all of them. Again, I highly recommend you to just click on the link in the description. It has the PDF, or you can even just Google Hatha Yoga Pradipika PDF and it'll show up, and go to page 191. And from there on, it goes into several pages of describing all the different ones. And it's really the thing that I find interesting, though, that I will point out that in the Satkarmas that they include Kapalabhati, and that there are different versions of the Kapalabhati. Because what I know Kapalabhati as, and I wish they put the page number of where this stuff is, but how I was taught Kapalabhati is skull shining breath, that it's a kriya, and it's essentially a breathing technique. And so to see that there are other ones attached to it is pretty interesting. Like Shitkrama, which is the hissing breath, where you open your mouth but you close your teeth and you breathe in through your teeth and breathe out through your teeth. So another one is Shitali Pranayama, and that's where you stick your tongue out and you curl it into a U and you breathe in through your tongue, and it's like a cooling breath. Another one here is Vatakrama, which is the typical Kapalabhati breathing technique, where it says here, inhale deeply and perform 50 fast respirations through both nostrils, placing more emphasis on the exhalation. So the last Satkarma that I want to go into briefly here is Trataka, which is eye gazing. And so this is the thought that there's purification that can be done through the eyes, particularly staring into a candle. So there's two Tratakas. Antararanga, which is internal, which would be an internal visualization where you're looking at something within your mind. And then Bahiranga, external, which would be staring at a candle. So again, I don't want to go too much into that stuff. Again, I just highly recommend having access to the book, reading through it, and kind of using this podcast as a way of just an introduction to these things and how to kind of get started here. So I think this episode is going to be a little bit longer because I'm already at the 44-minute mark here, but I'm going to continue on. So out of the list of things in that definition, Shatkarma, Asana, Pranayama, Mudra, Bandha, concentration. So now we're getting into the physical practice of doing an asana practice. And so now you've taken the steps to cleanse your body, and I don't assume or expect anybody to do all of them, but even if you're doing something like Jal Neti, cleansing out your sinuses, maybe you're doing the Sutra Neti to go a little bit deeper with the cloth that goes through your sinus. Maybe you're doing Vamana Dauti, where sometimes we eat something and our stomach feels a little bit off. That's a great way to cleanse out the stomach before it gets into our digestive system. Just drinking a whole bunch of salt water, and it's got to be warm. You don't want cold, so you want to boil a little bit of water, and it's got to be either like spring water, something really clean, or distilled water or filtered water. Don't just use tap water. There's actually some pretty crazy cases of people, and I think there's 2 accounts of a man and a woman independently of each other who did the Jal Neti with just tap water, and there was a bacteria in their tap water that basically caused a worm to go into their brain, and they got like some like weird like brain eating like amoeba in their brain. So use filtered water. I'm like not a great advocate right now. I'm like basically proving you guys not to do this stuff, but there's got to be necessary precautions to this stuff. So you're ever going to use gel neti and you're going to clean your sinuses with salt water, with the neti pot, use filtered water, and then it'll be all good. So now getting into the asana side of things, that the asana is now preparing the body for seated meditation. And that's pretty much strictly what the asana practice is for. When you compare the set of asanas from the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and from hundreds and hundreds of years ago to now, it's almost wildly different. The way that classes are structured now is pretty much strictly for fitness. It's to get people moving and to get people feeling like they're doing something that is going to help change their body in some way, either increasing flexibility or strength, losing weight, etc. Where the traditional methodology is to prepare for meditation. And this book, of course, has a whole set of postures that you can run through, which are the traditional kind of like 82 postures, or the traditional, I think, 26 with variations, and why you would do them, and the precautions and the techniques. Again, it's not really for me to try to get through all of them because there's a lot here. It's more so for me to recommend for you to look through this book with me. And to really emphasize that what the book is speaking on is the preparation for Raja Yoga and Samadhi, like it says in the definition, right? That the science of yoga, which purifies the whole physical body by means of Sat, Karma, Asana, Pranayama, Mudra, Bandha, concentration as a prelude to Raja Yoga and Samadhi. And so you got to think that cleansing your body through the Sat Karmas, one round of initiation. The asana practice and preparing your body to be limber and well enough to then sit in a seated practice for an extended period of time, another round of initiation. To then sit and to do the pranayamas and to focus in on the energetics of the body, another round of initiation. Then getting into mudras, holding the body into position. So the mudra just means gesture, and I'll get to this in a bit. I'm just kind of like going through what the initiations are. And then all of that is to then get into what Raja Yoga is and what Samadhi is for the next round of initiation, where now your focus is no longer on the physical body. Your focus now is on the energetics and you as a conscious being that can then enter into other realms. And you have to be able to leave the body where it is, where you're not perturbed by anything. And that's the reason for all the cleansing. So you're just not perturbed by those things of the body, the processes of the body and the reactions of, gag reflex, the reactions of vomiting, the reactions of cleaning out your sinuses, the reactions of your bowels and clearing out things from the other end, and all of that you're no longer perturbed by the body's functioning and what it does to process food and water, to get to the point where now you can move your body and you can put yourself into positions and breathe and focus. And so then after you've gone to the point where your asana practice supports your seated practice, where you can go into full lotus and you can sit unperturbed in full lotus, that is the goal. And so then your hips are open, your joints are comfortable, your spine is strong, your legs aren't falling asleep. Everything is attuned and in proper alignment. Then to get to the point where you can do your pranayama practice and you can get through some of the pranayamas that they talk about here. So there's just an interesting thing that I found on page 179 of the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. In the pranayama section, it says, quote, when prana moves through the body freely and sporadically like a roaming lion or tiger, it does not respond to your will. For example, you may want to sleep at night, but your prana makes you active. Or you may have to work, but your prana is inactive and you feel sleepy or ill. Therefore, prana has to be controlled so that it acts in accordance with your desire and will. The method you employ has to be safe, sure, and systematic, just as if you were taming a wild and unpredictable beast. If prana is left unrestrained, the eventual result is that the prana is exhausted and sickness and death occur. The life force and physical elements are burnt up as you expend your energy in mundane and worldly affairs. Prana has to be channelized and redirected so it is not wasted. So essentially that is suggesting that the yoga practice, the cleansing, the asana practice, the pranayama, the mudra, is allowing you to regulate your prana. And so that it is not sporadic and uncontrolled, where in one moment your prana is just completely consumed and used up, and then you feel depleted and you feel depressed. And so that the practice itself, you are executing a kind of observance and awareness of your body's regulated prana and energetic system. And so that each and every day you're doing your practice, it's not that you're just moving through the practice and you're just doing it to do it, that you are particularly observing the energetic flow that is occurring. And it manifests in different ways too. So when you're first getting into your practice, the way that the pranic flow will manifest is heat and sweat. So it's very normal in the first sense of becoming a yogi that your body is going to heat up and it's going to sweat a lot. So as you get better and better at controlling and regulating your prana, you'll no longer sweat and heat up. As long as you're in a normal temperature room. If you're in a hot yoga room, you're going to sweat. You know, you're in a room that's like 38 degrees, you know, you're going to sweat. But if you're just practicing in your home and you're finding that in a normal temperature, in a normal condition, you're heating up and sweating, that is like the first layer of the purification, because eventually you'll be able to move through your practice and you won't sweat and you won't heat up. And then that is a signifier that now it's time to feel into the subtleties of the movement of energy. So the last part here, mudras and bandhas. So now this is in the subtle section of the practice where the initiation is now going into how you are controlling your pranic flow in your seated practice through internal posturing. And by what I mean by internal posturing is how you are controlling subtle muscles in your pelvis, along your spine, in the roof of your mouth, at the base of your skull. And so that now you're looking at how you regulate your pranic flow up and down your spine. So in your asana and pranayama practice, you're looking at controlling pranic flow by no longer sweating, no longer heating up, no longer feeling perturbed or uncomfortable in your practice, because that's another part of it too. When you're doing your asana practice, if you can flow through everything to the point where it's done with ease and grace, and you're not going to really feel tightness anymore, you're not really going to feel like there's any areas that are sticky or tense, that you're able to be in the posture and freely breathe and freely move, that when you come down to your seated practice and now you're doing the levels of pranayama that are going into the mudras and the bandhas, that you're really tuned into the energetic flow of your body and your system. And now mudra, which just means gesture, is that you are placing your body into particular gestures and holding them to really look into the energetics of it. And so there's mudras with the hands that are the most notable, like touching your index finger to your thumb, or your middle finger to your thumb, or ring finger to thumb, or pinky to the thumb, or bringing your hands together and clasping your hands, or placing them in a particular position with, say, the fingers over top of each other and the thumbs touching. There's all kinds of mudras. And these mudras are going to help with the subtle awareness of energetic flow. So bringing your thumb and your forefinger together is going to feel different than your middle finger and your thumb, or ring finger and thumb, and pinky and thumb. And so when it comes to the hand gestures, the fingers associate with particular chakras or particular elements. And so your pinky is associated with the element of earth, or Muladhara chakra. Your ring finger is water, or Svadhisthana chakra. Your middle finger is fire, or Muladhara, Manipura chakra. Your index finger is air, or Anahata, and your thumb is ether, or Vishuddha. And so when you bring them together, you're bringing those elements together, and there's a particular intention for each one. So if you're particularly working on Muladhara chakra and rooting yourself and grounding yourself in security and working on the element of earth in your practice, you'd bring your pinky and your thumb together when you sit down to meditate, and you're doing like certain chants and bija mantras around the root chakra, and likewise with any of those other ones too. And that's the cool thing about the yoga practice, is that you can design your practice around the energetics and the systems that they have. So, you know, in my past episodes, I did a whole series on the chakras, on the koshas, and the pranavayus. And so you can build your whole practice around focusing in on the principles of those energetic systems. So say you really want to work on grounding, and you want to work on being more earthy. So for me, when I look at my astrological charts, I have pretty much primarily air and water and fire. I have 0 earth. And so it's helpful for me to bring the earth element consciously into my life. And the way that it shows up is eating more and literally being heavier. My constitution is air, water, fire, and predominantly air and fire. And so if I don't bring in more earthiness, I'm just scattered all over the place. I'm just wild in my fire and my air, and water just doesn't do anything to help any of that, right? And so it's beneficial for me to actually have a diet that's heavier and richer, so that my body is heavier and more grounded. And then psychologically, I'm slowing down. My mind always was so quick and airy and fiery, and I would get temperamental. And so when I'm focusing on earth elements, I'm less temperamental. I get less angry. I get less reactive. I'm less airy and all over the place and scattered, and I can be more focused, and I can be more grounded. And so then my physical practice can reflect that work as well. So my practice is slower. I'm not quickly moving through it and going really, really fast. I'm slowing down. I'm taking more breaths. I'm doing more earthing and focusing on my feet on the ground, rather than always focusing on where my hands and my arms are and flowing through my upper body. That I'm focusing more on my lower body and my legs and my pelvis and my feet, and then doing more like seated work, where rather than always doing a vinyasa flow and flowing a lot and flowing a lot and flowing a lot and a lot of ups and downs, I use my vinyasa just to get me up and to do some breath work and do some movement up and doing some warrior posturing and focusing on grounding, then I'm back down onto the ground. Then I'm doing more seated practice stuff. And then I'm doing like the pinky and thumb mudra and focusing on Muladhara and focusing on the yantra for Muladhara and the Bija mantra Lam. And really, and I can even feel it right now, like even just talking about it, that I feel myself coming in, being more grounded and taking on those elements. And then you can kind of see how the yoga system is really going to help you understand your own constitution, your body type as well. And to see that, if you were to look at your birth chart and you were to look at what's predominant in your chart as in terms of the elements, that'll give you a good indication of what you can work on, because we're not all the same. There can be someone that was born the very same day as me, but have slightly different charts because of the location of where they were born. Even if there were, all the kids that were born on November 9th in 1987 in the hospital that I was born at, all of our placements are going to be slightly different. And so taking that into consideration can be really important, not as like a woo-woo thing of like, oh, what are my charts telling me today? It's more so of just understanding your constitution and what your body is naturally made up of and what kind of balance there is in the elements, because those elements show up in our body actually quite literally. Earth, the physicality of the body, the bones and the muscles and the connective tissues and tendons and the matter. Water, literally water. There is water in our body. We drink water. We rely on water. Fire, literally through the nervous system, that our synapses fire and connect our brain to our nervous system to the rest of our body. And then air, literally we breathe air. And then aether, space, literally space is pervasive in all of us. Between all of our particles, between everything in our body is space. And so there's something naturally predominant in our constitution in those elements and something naturally missing. And so we just have to figure out what's missing, and then we can build a yoga practice. And that is quite literally what these old rishis knew. And that's why we have the chakra systems, and that's why they're based on the elements, and that's why they're integrated into the koshas and the pranavayus, and they are associated with postures. And that's one thing I love about my teacher's encyclopedia and his book of yoga postures, is that he includes what chakras each posture works on. And there's like 800 postures. And so that's really the secret of these practices, is that when you do them and you design it for yourself to bring balance to these elements, that over a period of time, you will be a balanced person. It'll be very noticeable that you show up in everything that you do as a balanced person, because you're doing the daily work in your practice to bring balance to your constitution and to bring balance to those elements, that then as you show up in life, you are going to show up as a balanced person. And so this last one, the bandhas, are a little bit tricky, because now this is going into finer motor control of processes in your body that we don't normally have an awareness of. And so bandha just means lock, and there are three primary locks. It's Mula Bandha, which is root lock, Uddiyana Bandha, which is the stomach lock and the diaphragm lock, and then Jalandhar Bandh, which is throat lock. And I'm going to tell a story in a second here, but these three individually help bring control to a lot of really fine motor skill muscles, especially Mula Bandh. Mula Bandh, out of the three, I think is the most difficult, because in your pelvis, you have all these different muscles that make up the pelvic floor. And so Mula Bandh is this diaphragm that is basically right in, it's like right where the sphincter, where your butthole is, which in yoga they call it Ashvini. And so it's like right where your butthole is to right where your pelvic floor is to right where your reproductive organ muscles are, that there's a diaphragm there that you can isolate and basically pull in and lift up, and it helps lock everything in place there. And so you have that lock, then you have Uddiyana Bandh, which is the muscles running under the ribs into your diaphragm. And this is where you create like that vacuum where you exhale everything out and pull your stomach in and up, and it basically connects to your diaphragm and lifts up. And then Jalandhar Bandh is just simply tucking your chin down towards your throat and bringing your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and it connects the throat up to the soft palate, and you create this suction up into the soft palate. And all three of them together make Maha Bandh, the Great Lock. And initiating all of these three together is really intense. This is something that I actually do in my regular practice. So Maha Bandh is like a part of my daily work, or whenever I have the chance to practice. And this is something that I've been doing for years now. It's been a part of my practice since I kind of figured it all out back in, I think, 2014, 2015, 16. And there's something that I figured out, and I got the confirmation from my teacher, and he was actually quite surprised that I figured this out. But I remember when I was at the ashram for the second time helping the assisted teacher training, that I was just thinking about the practice that I do, and I was thinking about these locks, and I stumbled upon something that I initially called Ajna Bandha. So I was thinking, okay, if you have these four locks and the third lock kind of connects to the roof of your mouth, and then the soft palate will also act as a diaphragm to pull in and up, is that going to pull in and up within something in the brain around Ajna Chakra? And so I thought I discovered this whole like new lock, and I went to my teacher and I showed him all this, and I said, hey, what do you think about this? Is this accurate? Is there this fourth lock called Ajna that I would call Ajna Bandha? And he looked at me and he was like, there is a fourth lock, but it's not called Ajna Bandha. And he like kind of looked at me for a second, and he was like, this isn't something I or anyone ever teaches. He's like, I'm actually kind of surprised that you figured this out. He's like, but there is a fourth lock called Kapala Bandh. So just like there's Kapalabhati, and Kapalabhati means skull shining. So Kapala, I believe, means skull. And so Kapala Bandh is like the skull lock. And how we do this one is you do the Maha Bandh, but then you use your hand to squeeze your nose, and in your nose and in around your eyes, you go to like breathe, but you can't breathe because you've exhaled everything out. You're holding this vacuum and lock, and it basically pulls in your nostrils and in your sinus and then up into your brain. And he just gave me the precaution. He's like, this is a really strong one. Just be careful with this. And he's like, and the side effect is, he's like, this might sound weird, but you'll start to feel this sudden upward pull, and it'll kind of make you hop. And I know it sounds weird, but you have to also understand that these practices and doing these things is awakening something in your nervous system. You are deliberately putting yourself into a position that you normally will never, ever put yourself into. And so I'm under the impression that what the yoga practice is a way of activating kind of secret functions of the body that we may have lost touch with as a global society over thousands of years. And that our predominant use of the body is like the basic run-of-the-mill operation of, I wake up, I eat breakfast, I go to work, I come home from work, I watch my favorite TV show, I go to bed. That just normal programming is the basic function of the body, of make sure I have shelter, make sure I have food, make sure I have water, make sure I have entertainment, and then procreate and have kids and have a family and then go and do things. And that normal day-to-day operation is what we typically understand what being a human is. But then yoga is introducing a whole new way of understanding how the body functions and what we can introduce to change what our experience of being a human is. And I think that's really important to understand. So when I look at these kind of techniques and practices where I just did a whole asana sequence, now I'm seated, now I'm doing my last bit of stretching, now I'm going to get into whatever pranayama, and I'm seated, I'm doing the Mahabandha, I'm closing my nostrils, I'm creating the suction in my brain, I'm feeling this like hopping, kind of pulling energy. What is that doing? So that is my question. What is that doing? And it seems like it is preparing for a new kind of exploration of consciousness. That once I sit and I close my eyes and I go completely silent and I go completely still, that all of that practice has allowed me to completely detach from any kind of desire that this body would have for the mundane operation. That I've tuned myself out of that wake up and go to work and have breakfast and have lunch and talk to my friends and be entertained and go out to dinner and do this and do that and do this and do that. That the practice has allowed me to shift into a new kind of awareness of operation, that being a human doesn't have to rely on that. That now I can leave the physical realm and I can leave the physical attachment to the way that the body is operating in this realm. And now I can be a consciousness that is exploring a new purpose, that I'm going into a realm that is not visible to the way we operate in physical reality. That now, as a conscious being outside of that, I go, okay, I now have another purpose as a conscious being that's no longer attached to this physical body. What is my task in this new realm? And for the most part, what yoga has suggested is that it is bringing knowledge and wisdom from this realm that is away from the physical realm, gaining knowledge and wisdom from that, interacting with new enlightened beings, interacting with a new kind of energy to bring it back into that body. So that when you are back as a physical being, you can still operate with this new kind of purpose as a conscious being, and your day-to-day habits start suddenly change. And this is why when you have a potent enlightened experience, what some of the side effects are is kind of not wanting to live the life that you were living, to suddenly see that you have a greater purpose. But there's a caveat to that, and there are consequences. And so you have to learn to blend these two worlds together so that you're not suddenly abandoning everything, and that you can see that you can slowly blend this like new purpose into the life that you're living. So I think this is a good combination of good information and me ranting and telling stories. So I hope that gives you a good idea of what the Hatha Yoga practice is. I think I'll do one more part to go into kind of the difference between the past model of a yoga practice and the new model of the yoga practice, and why it's not helpful to have a negative comparison. Because you'll see that a lot on social media, especially on Instagram, that you'll see these people make these videos of like complaining about all the different kinds of yoga. Oh, there's beer yoga and goat yoga and this yoga and that yoga, and it's all bad, and you need to look into the traditional practices and stop supporting all that stuff. It's like, I think that is such a toxic way of looking at what yoga is on this planet, and why I think all of it is good. And for the most part, we need to get out of this whole like strict outlook that yoga has to look a particular way, and that the whole narrative around the colonization of yoga is just so inaccurate. And so I'll get into all that stuff in the next episode. Because now, we're at like over one hour and 20 minutes. So I hope you learned something good about this episode. And as always, check out the description and all the links. I have links to my music, music for my band, links for my teacher and his school, and his trainings, and some breathing techniques that he shared on YouTube, and also the link for the Hatha Yoga Pradipika. I highly recommend just go through it, pick some things out. You can try to just read it cover to cover, but for me, it's more of a choose your adventure kind of book, where you open it to a part that has some techniques, you learn those techniques. And I think what I'm going to do in the next episode is, as I discuss the differences between, older practices and the modern practice, I think what I'll do is I'll design a yoga practice, and we'll just go step by step. And this is one that you could use, and we'll see how that goes. I'll think about it, but I think that would be a cool way of having something that then you can take out of the podcast and then go and do. And again, follow me on Instagram, Yogi Zorananda. ask me the questions. I don't have my website up right now. I was just paying for it, and it was more for my music stuff. But I think I just need to really design a good yoga website that has all my stuff, and that's linked to my podcast and everything. So I'm going to really think about that stuff, but I'll leave it at that. Thank you again for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day and enjoy.